I wanted to do a short video on how to do, or some pointers to do the history kit that you've just received in the mail. The whole idea of the history kit was to show my family, the Swan White family that came from Germany, and that's the pot. They came on the Sally ship in 1752, and then the flowers were the brothers and the family that settled here. The two birds are Avery, are Lucas and Krista, and then Avery's the little bird, the last of the generation so far. Now, it doesn't matter, you really don't have to do that. You could just do the rug as a decorative piece, not have any of the initials, not have the story to tell for it. You could also use it as for your children, grandchildren, things like that, if you wanted to do that. Also, you could just use it as an applique piece with no embroidery, none of the names and that sort of thing. If you do, I suggest that you do put something decorative, a decorative stitch. I have one decorative stitch here, and I'll show you. It's like that. It's just the ordinary star that we have on the marriage rugs, plaid rug, that sort of thing, and then it's the little French knots. So something like that, and you could do your rug. The other thing is, I know I have it in the instructions, but the instructions are from my very first kit that I did. And I didn't notice it until someone mentioned it. I didn't have a backing or a lining for that rug, but apparently I did send thread. I don't remember that. But I didn't send thread this time because I wanted it to be your choice. I wanted part of the rug to be a little bit of your design. This is, I believe, 2 strands of embroidery floss, just regular floss, or 1 strand. It looks maybe like 1 strand. If I would have done this over, I would have put the thread a bit thicker. But I didn't want it, I didn't want the threads and the stitching. Basically, I just wanted the stitching to keep the applique pieces in place. I didn't want it to distract from the story in the rug. If you're doing it without a story, I would suggest that you add a bit thicker thread. As to the color of the thread, match it a bit darker than your pieces that you have for the that I've given you for these applique pieces. I would do it a bit darker. You could do pearl cotton, you could do embroidery floss, you could do some of your other types of thread that you use. Basically, if you're not telling the story, let the stitching tell the story and let the stitching stand out. If you're telling the story, then the stitching is sort of the background that just holds everything in place, and your story, your initials, your dates, whatever, should be the one that stands out. Now, as far as this is in pretty bad shape. This was very thin, just like the material. Those stitches are coming out there. You can see that. I'll show you that. I didn't even realize that. These are coming out. The material was very thin, and it really should be very thin. It's very good material. And I wanted to show you, I don't know how old the rug is, but it was hand bound, hand stitched to bind it. So possibly this was hand woven. It didn't have a centerpiece, but it was actually bound by running stitches by hand. So it's very old. The other thing is you need to be very careful when you cut these pieces out. You don't want them to fray. Now, there are many ways to do it, of course. Oh, darn it, I lost my bird there. So the easiest way is, if you have some sort of a special pen or something, just to take your pieces and trace it. Just trace them on, and then use your scissors. And I actually did that with an ink pen. And then cut them. And then it won't fray. It will probably fray a bit while you're stitching from the handling. So just be very careful of that and clip them as you go along to stitch. So that's the easiest way. The way you do not want to do, I don't think, and I would say this would be my least preferable way to do it, is with freezer paper. And you know, we've always done applique with freezer paper. I actually can't find freezer paper here in Nova Scotia where I live. It's just non-existent. Not on the shelves. And Amazon's a possibility, but apparently now they sell freezer paper for crafts instead of freezing things. So when you're doing freezer paper, it's going to fray. Not too bad, but be very careful of it when you take it apart. So if you have freezer paper, you can do that. It's not too bad. There's a few frays there, but that's another possibility. What I'm using now, because I don't have freezer paper, and I have another rug started, I'll just put it over there and show you. I have the red rug, so I'm cutting out pieces. I cut an outline, and I just use ordinary masking tape. But you do need the outline cut if your material frays. And then I just put the tape over it, and I cut through the tape and paper. Now, the disadvantage of that is you're going to dull your scissors. So you would just cut along. You need to have that extra. You don't cut where the actual pattern is, because that sort of holds it in place and it prevents fraying. But that's how I've been doing my cutting my applique out lately, since I couldn't find freezer paper. And it actually just comes off like that. I'll do this end. It's really nice, actually. It's fine if you have good wool and it doesn't fray. You can just keep repeating the pattern, or you don't need that extra little bit of paper there. But it's so easy. There are so many things you can do with tape from the dollar store. And it just comes off like that. Isn't that neat? Nice and clean. So, everything's labeled, and you have your placement chart. Now, be careful when you put your applique pieces on, don't put them too far to the edge, because remember, you're going to have your binding. So you need some good spaces around the outside. I have used the V blanket stitch, but there again, I want you to make it your own design. I want you to design this with me. It's going to be ours. It's going to be my basic design, and your stitches, your threads, your applique, how you do it, we're going to do it together. So this is the stitch that I've used, and it's very easy. I've given you a chart to do that. And of course you have the pattern. Now, the other thing I wanted to mention to you is I don't have a piece of binding. I used every one that I had. But when I did the binding, I tore it on the straight of the grain. And it's the old material, and that is going to fray too. So before you do your binding, and you have quite a bit for binding, just go through and make a nice straight cut so that you don't have a lot of, and do this just before you put it on, because the more you handle it, of course, the more it's going to fray. Now, you can certainly do the binding with sewing machine. And of course you put it on the front like this. The pressure foot would be your guide, of course. If you're doing it by hand and you don't, let's see, where do I have it? If you don't have a good, if you're not good at making a straight line, you would just do a mark, put a little bit of a mark, and use a piece of tape, and then that's your straight line. And I use masking tape for that, if I do it. I use masking tape a lot to cut bindings and things like that. So that's another idea that you could do. And I think that's it, really. I don't know of anything else to tell you. I will give you close-ups, and I'll show you this. The stems. When I did the V-stitch, I stitched them so that they were completely covering the stem. And I didn't do a very good job of it. I'm not good at decorative stitches. Blanket stitch, that's pretty much it for me. So it does look a bit better, and it holds it down better. So I think that's it, really. I've gone over your threads, the binding, and be very careful when you cut your applique pieces out. It's going to be a really, really nice rug. Mine is a little bit more on the brownish green shade. It was an old army blanket. But this is going to be so nice for a binding, because it's going to go so well, and it's so old. I'm not quite sure what that was. I think it was an old tablecloth. So that is it, and I hope that you enjoy making it. I'm always in the closet. Just message me if you need help. And happy stitching.